The silence was the worst part. Not the dwindling oxygen readouts, not the frostbite creeping through the hull breaches, not even the certainty of death, just the silence. Kale Voss had been alone in the corpse of the Whisper of Tides for 3 days, and the quiet had become a living thing, pressing against eardrums, crawling into thoughts, making every breath sound like thunder in the empty corridors. Day 3, hour 17, Kale said aloud, because hearing a voice, even their own, kept the void at bay. Still no rescue, still no signal penetration. The Fold continues to be the worst vacation destination in the known universe. 0 stars. Would not recommend. They laughed, a brittle sound that echoed off twisted bulkheads and died quickly. The merchant vessel had been hauling quantum resonators through the shipping lanes when the anomaly bloomed out of nowhere, a rupture in space that swallowed the ship whole and spat it into this dead zone where physics went soft around the edges. The crew had evacuated in the pods, leaving Kale, who'd been sleeping off a double shift in the cargo bay, to wake up alone in a drifting tomb. The emergency beacon was fried. The engines were slag. The life support wheezed like a dying animal, rationing oxygen in miserly increments that guaranteed maybe 2 more days if Kale stopped moving entirely. They'd spent the first day trying to repair something, anything. The second day cataloging supplies with the grim efficiency of someone writing their own eulogy. Protein paste, 3 packs. Water recycler, functional but pointless without rescue. 1 emergency thermal blanket, which did nothing against the cold leaking through the hull from the quantum foam outside. The Fold was famous for this. Space here was thin, reality porous, and the ship drifted through pockets where temperature meant nothing and time folded back on itself in strange loops. The echoes had started on day 2. Phantom impressions bleeding through from parallel timelines, moments from the ship's final seconds replaying over and over. Kale would round a corner and see the ghostly outline of Engineer Thames reaching for a control panel that had been vaporized in the collision, his mouth open in a scream that never made sound. Or Captain Oren standing at her station, hands moving through commands on consoles that no longer existed, her face locked in an expression of horrified realization. The echoes were harmless, just quantum foam bubbling up through the cracks in reality, but they made the isolation worse. Surrounded by ghosts, Kale was somehow more alone than ever. At least ghosts are company, Kale muttered, shuffling through the captain's quarters where they'd decided to make camp. The room was relatively intact, still had a functioning door that sealed, which meant it held heat better than the rest of the wreck. They dragged a survival pack here, laid out the thermal blanket, and resigned themselves to waiting for the oxygen to run out. Could be worse. Could be talking to a volleyball. Could be carving faces into bulkheads and naming them. Could be a flicker at the edge of vision. Another echo, probably. Kale ignored it, too tired for ghosts tonight. They collapsed onto the blanket, muscles aching from the cold and the constant low gravity stumbling through broken corridors. Sleep came hard in the Fold. Dreams here were vivid, invasive, sometimes bleeding in from those same parallel timelines. But exhaustion was a stronger force than fear. "Good night, nobody," Kale whispered to the empty room and closed their eyes, certain that morning wouldn't come, or if it did, they wouldn't wake to see it. The silence pressed down like a hand over the mouth, suffocating and absolute, and for a moment Kale almost welcomed it. Better than waiting. Better than counting down the hours until the oxygen gauge hit 0. But morning did come. Light, pale and strange, filtered through the quantum distortions outside, crept through the porthole and touched Kale's face. They stirred, groggy, confused by the fact of waking at all. The oxygen should have been lower. They should have been weaker. Something was wrong. And then they saw her. She lay sprawled across the deck plating 3 meters away, draped in armor that caught the pale light and threw it back in fractured rainbows. Kale blinked once, twice, convinced this was hypoxia finally claiming their brain, painting hallucinations across the dying neurons. But the woman didn't vanish. She remained stubbornly solid, chest rising and falling with breath, one arm flung out dramatically as if she'd collapsed mid-gesture. "Oh good," Kale said to the empty room, voice hoarse. "I've officially lost it. 3 days and I'm seeing people. What's next? A full choir, dancing bears." They sat up slowly, every joint protesting, and stared at the impossible figure. The woman wore ceremonial plating that looked functional and ornamental at once, golden filigree winding through dark metal, symbols etched deep that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in more dimensions than the eye could process. Her skin shimmered with iridescence, copper bleeding into violet depending on how the light struck, and her hair moved independently, each strand drifting like it was underwater, responding to currents that didn't exist. The woman's eyes snapped open. They were too large, pupils elongated vertically like a predator's, and they fixed on Kale with the intensity of someone waking from a nightmare into something worse. Where she started, then stopped, taking in the ruined quarters the twisted bulkheads, Kale's haggard face. "What is this place?" "The part of my dying brain that conjures beautiful alien women," Kale said, "because if they were hallucinating they might as well commit to the bit. Welcome, sorry about the accommodations. Budget cuts, you know how it is." The woman sat up in one fluid motion, armor clinking softly. "You're real, I'm real. This is," she pressed a hand to the deck, fingers splaying wide. "This is a ship. Broken, old." Her accent was strange, vowels stretched in ways that suggested a throat not quite shaped like a human's. "Old and broken, yes, that's the whisper of tides, or what's left of her." Kale stood, keeping distance between them, still not entirely convinced this wasn't oxygen deprivation playing tricks. "And you are?" "Velora Anthonis." She rose to her feet with the kind of grace that suggested gravity was optional for her. "Supreme Ascendant of the Crescent Empire, commander of the Eternal Armada, keeper of the Threshold Worlds." She paused, clearly expecting recognition. When Kale just stared blankly, something flickered across her face, annoyance, maybe confusion. "You don't know the Empire." "The Crescent Empire collapsed 400 years ago," Kale said slowly. "It's a history unit, ruins on dead worlds. Very tragic, lots of dramatic murals about the fall." Velora's expression went through several rapid changes, disbelief, anger, something that might have been fear. "Impossible. I was in the throne hall. I was addressing my fleet commanders." There was a flash, a sensation of falling, and then she gestured at the wreck around them. "This. Right, so we're both having a psychotic break. Fantastic." Kale ran a hand through their hair, which had gone greasy and wild over 3 days without hygiene. "Let me guess. You're going to tell me this is all a simulation, and I need to wake up." "I don't know what this is." Velora moved to the porthole, stared out at the quantum foam roiling beyond the hull. The distortions made space look liquid, reality bending and folding like fabric in a breeze. "That's fold space. The boundary regions. We mapped these centuries ago, declared them forbidden territories." She turned back to Kale. "How did you end up here?" "Cargo run gone wrong. Anomaly ate my ship. Crew evacuated, I got left behind, now I'm waiting to suffocate." Kale shrugged. "Your turn. How does an empress from a dead empire materialize in my dying fever dream?" "I told you I'm not," Velora started, then stopped as her hand began to fade. She held it up, watching as the iridescent skin turned translucent, bones becoming visible through disappearing flesh. "No, no, not yet. I need to understand." "Okay, that's new and terrifying," Kale said, taking a step back. "Are you dying? Are we both dying? Is this a shared dying hallucination? Because honestly, that's kind of romantic in a horrible way." Velora's entire form was going transparent now, armor and all, like she was being erased from existence. Her eyes locked on Kale's, wide with something that might have been panic. "Find me again," she said, voice thinning. "Tomorrow. If this happens again, find me." And then she was gone, completely. The space where she'd stood was empty, just damaged deck plating and recycled air. Kale stood frozen, heart hammering, trying to reconcile what they'd just witnessed with anything resembling sanity. "Right," they said finally, voice shaking. "Definitely the hypoxia. Definitely just the brain shutting down and throwing a party on the way out." But they checked the oxygen gauge anyway and found it hadn't dropped as much as it should have. Almost like time had skipped forward, or stopped entirely, or done something physics wasn't supposed to allow. Morning came again, which was becoming a disturbing pattern. Kale woke to find Velora exactly where she'd been before, sprawled on the deck in full regalia, looking like she'd been dropped from a great height. The Empress stirred, sat up, and immediately scanned the room with those unnerving cat-pupil eyes. "You," she said, focusing on Kale. "The human from the wreck, where am I? What happened to my throne hall?" Kale's stomach dropped. "You don't remember yesterday. You don't remember vanishing." "Yesterday." Velora stood, brushing non-existent dust from her armor. "I was addressing my commanders 30 seconds ago. There was a flash and now I'm here, again." She said the last word with bitter emphasis. "This is the second time. No, third. The memories are unclear. Fourth, actually. Day 4 of my extended stay in this floating coffin." Kale sat up, mind racing. The implications were stacking up in ways that made their head hurt. "You keep appearing at what I'm calling morning, you fade out at night, and each time you don't remember the previous visits. To you, no time passes between disappearances." Velora pressed fingertips to her temples, a gesture so human it was jarring on her alien features. "The fold. This region is notorious for temporal distortions, but I've never heard of anything like this. A bridge between timelines, perhaps. The quantum foam here is thick enough to punch through parallel realities." "Oh good, you understand the physics that's ruining my life. Explain it like I didn't flunk out of Academy astrophysics." Kale hauled themselves up, joints popping. 4 days of cold and stress were taking their toll. "The ship is sitting on a rift," Velora said, moving to the porthole with that predatory grace. "A tier between parallel universes. In my reality, the Empire thrives. In yours, apparently, we're ancient history and you're stuck making jokes while you die slowly. The rift is pulling me through each cycle, snatching me from my timeline and depositing me here." "Fantastic. So I'm not hallucinating, I'm just experiencing a quantum kidnapping. That's so much better for my mental health." Kale shuffled to the emergency supply locker, pulling out the remains of breakfast. Protein paste. Velora stared at the tube like Kale had offered her poison. "I command fleets. I don't eat paste." "Yeah, well, I command absolutely nothing and it's paste or starvation. So pick your adventure, your Imperial Highness." Kale squeezed a portion into their mouth, immediately regretting every life choice that led to this moment. The paste tasted like sadness and artificial chicken. Velora's expression flickered through several emotions before settling on pragmatic resignation. She took the tube, examined it with scientific curiosity, then squeezed out a small amount. Her face went through a remarkable journey of disgust. "This is what you eat. This is what keeps me alive for another day, yes. Welcome to the working class, Empress. It's terrible and we're all tired." Despite herself, Velora laughed. The sound was musical, layered in harmonics that suggested her vocal structure was more complex than human. "You're dying slowly in a wreck, completely alone, and you're making jokes. Comedy is tragedy plus time, and I've got nothing but time until the oxygen runs out." Kale moved to the ship's emergency terminal, the one system still limping along on backup power. "But if you're real and this rift is real, maybe we can figure out what caused it." The whisper of tides was hauling quantum resonators, experimental models designed to stabilize wormholes. Black market stuff, very illegal, very unstable. Velora joined them at the terminal, reading over Kale's shoulder. Her hair drifted forward, individual strands nearly brushing Kale's face, and they caught a scent like ozone and something floral that didn't exist in nature. These resonators, they malfunctioned during the collision, created a feedback loop with the fold's natural quantum foam. Instead of stabilizing anything, they tore open a passage between realities. And you're the unlucky winner of the interdimensional lottery. Kale pulled up the damage reports, scrolling through screen after screen of failures. The resonators are still active, barely. They're in the cargo bay, probably keeping the rift open. Then we shut them down. Velora straightened, slipping instantly into command mode. We sever the connection, I return to my timeline, you continue dying alone. Problem solved. Wow, you really know how to motivate people. But Kale was already moving toward the door. The cargo bay is 3 sections forward. Hull breaches between here and there, minimal atmosphere, temperature approaching absolute zero. We'll need suits. I don't need, Velora started, then stopped as her hand began fading again. The iridescence flickered, skin going translucent. Not now, I need more time. Looks like the universe disagrees. Kale watched as Velora disappeared completely, leaving only empty air and the ghost of that ozone floral scent. They stood alone in the quarters, protein paste turning to ash in their mouth, and felt the weight of isolation crash back down. See you tomorrow, I guess, they said to nothing, and wondered how much longer they could keep having these conversations before the loneliness broke something fundamental inside them. Day 5 arrived without Velora fading at dusk. She'd been solid for 18 hours now, pacing the captain's quarters like a caged predator, and the change had both of them on edge. Kale monitored the rift data on the emergency terminal while Velora stood at the porthole, watching the quantum foam churn with increasing violence. It's not closing, she said, voice tight. The rift, it's expanding. I can see the distortion spreading. Kale pulled up the resonator readings and felt their chest tighten. You're right. The feedback loop is accelerating. At this rate, the rift will destabilize completely within 48 hours. Meaning what exactly? Velora turned from the window, and for the first time since appearing, she looked genuinely afraid. Meaning both our timelines collapse into each other. Your empire, my ruins. Everything between, all of it crushed into one unstable reality that probably can't support either. Kale stood, running calculations in their head that all led to the same terrible conclusion. We can sever the rift permanently using the resonators, shut them down in a specific sequence, collapse the bridge. Then we do it. Velora moved toward the door, now before it's too late. There's a catch. Kale blocked her path, hating what they had to say next. The shutdown sequence has to be initiated from both sides of the rift simultaneously. Someone stays here, someone goes back to your timeline. We coordinate the collapse from opposite ends. Velora went very still. I can't go back. I've been here too long, the bridge has stabilized around my presence. If I try to cross now, the rift will tear itself apart and take both realities with it. So you're trapped here, permanently. Kale felt something twist in their chest. Your empire is leaderless. Your people are probably tearing themselves apart looking for you. They'll survive. They'll adapt. But if the timelines merge, Velora moved to the terminal, pulling up projections that showed reality buckling under the weight of 2 universes trying to occupy the same space. My throne hall is already bleeding through. I can see it sometimes, overlapping with this wreck. My advisors searching, calling my name. They're ghosts in your world and I can't reach them. Kale stared at the projections, seeing glimpses of the Crescent Empire in its glory, vast ships, thriving worlds, millions of lives dependent on a leader who was gone. There has to be another way. Some kind of message, a signal to let them know you're alive. A message won't stop a civil war, won't prevent the fracturing of everything I built. Velora's voice cracked, the imperial composure finally breaking. But it's better than destroying 2 entire realities, because I refuse to accept exile. They stood in silence, the weight of impossible choices pressing down. Kale looked at this woman who'd appeared in their dying moments, who'd made the last days of their life strange and terrifying and somehow less lonely. I'm sorry, I know that doesn't help, but I am. Don't apologize. You didn't create this rift. Velora managed something that almost resembled a smile, And at least I'm not dying alone in a wreck eating protein paste. Wait, no, I am doing that now. Your life is contagious. Kale barked a laugh, surprised by the joke from someone so used to command. Welcome to Rock Bottom, Empress. Population 2, amenities non-existent, emergency exits unclear. 3 days ago I ruled galaxies. Now I'm making jokes about paste. Velora shook her head, hair drifting in that impossible way. The universe has a cruel sense of humor. Yeah, but at least we're laughing. Kale moved to the resonator controls, fingers hovering over the activation sequence. Ready to save 2 realities and doom yourself to this floating tomb with me. Wait, Velora caught Kale's hand, stopping them. You're stranded too. When I said someone has to stay here, I meant someone has to survive here. The rift collapse will release enough energy to power the emergency beacon. Once we sever the connection, your distress signal will punch through the fold. Rescue will come. Kale felt hope flare, fragile and terrifying. You're sure? I commanded fleets through fold space for decades, I'm sure. Velora squeezed their hand, the touch warm despite her alien skin. You'll survive this. You'll tell them about the Empress who appeared in your wreck and then helped save 2 universes. They'll think you've gone mad. They won't be wrong. Kale looked at their joined hands, at this impossible woman from an impossible timeline. For what it's worth, I'm glad you were my hallucination, even if you turned out to be real and complicated. Likewise, salvage pilot. Velora released Kale's hand and moved to the secondary terminal. On 3. They counted down together, fingers on separate